All right, everyone, at long last, I get to cover this New York Times article from several days ago that I kept having to bump because of other more pertinent news. And I wanted to get back into the occult a little bit because it's almost spooky days. It's almost Halloween. You see actually occasionally ads for that even on TV here in the Netherlands. It's funny, though, because Halloween's not a big thing here. It's sort of like a niche holiday, whereas in the US, it's all anyone talks about. And then the day later, on November 1st, Christmas begins. Like, you don't even have a Thanksgiving festivity these days. I think that that's sad because Turkey Day is Tasty Day. It's a funny opinion piece. Tech companies are destroying democracy and the free press. I rate this as mostly false. There is a kernel of truth to it, though. The gist of this article is that the tech firms enabling people like me, that's destroying the free press because people are criticizing CNN and leaving mean comments and stuff. The idea is that the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and these other poor corporations, these poor people, have to deal with people like me, and they can't do it, and so they want to say that it's an attack on democracy by billionaires. Really what's happening is the kernel of truth is this. Tech firms are definitely not helping democracy. Whatever that's worth. The democratic process in a more decentralized sense is great. Direct democracy as a form of government, of course, is the tyranny of the majority, so that's something to seek to avoid. That's why we have a democratic republic here. In most of the civilized world, that's the function of government that you have. The free press, this is the free press. The ability to analyze material, give an opinion. This is an opinion piece on the internet. I fail to see how this right up here on the New York Times is fundamentally different other than medium from what I'm doing here on video. I'm doing this via video. If this person had taken this opinion piece and read it out on a video and plopped it on YouTube, it would be exactly the same as what I'm doing. It's analysis, it's opinion. In some cases, you have citizen journalism. You have people who have actually gone out, conducted interviews. Sargon's been doing that pertinent to Brexit. Lauren Southern was doing that when she was active. Tim Pool does that. There's actual on-the-ground footage being taken. People are spoken to. Discourse is had. Philosophy is discussed. That's the measure of the free press. The concept of the press, under the auspices of our founding in the United States at least, was that it was the freedom of people to distribute information by non-personal means. Free speech is I'm talking to you directly. You're actually in front of me physically. I'm talking to you in an interpersonal manner. I have the right to speak to you about what I wish to speak to you about. Or free speech would be I'm up on a stump speaking to a group of people. It's very much in person. This is an activity of the press. This is the release of information to other people that is considered philosophical, educational, its opinion, whatever it happens to be. I'm not doing it in an interpersonal way. I'm doing it from afar. You're looking at a two-dimensional image of me right now, whether it be on YouTube, on BitChute, on Dailymotion. Supposedly there's like a podcast of me on some Apple app out there that frequently drops out, and I'm not the one doing that, so somebody must be automatically compiling things for audio purposes. That's fine, I guess, by the way, but it's not me who runs it, so I don't know. I don't use any Apple products or services, so I didn't even know that existed. So maybe you're just listening to me right now. That's an activity of the press. The tech firm's attack on the free press takes the form of censoring people like me. Nobody is going after the New York Times and censoring them. The New York Times and CNNs of the world, the Fox Newses, the Breitbarts, the corporate heavy hitters get a boost up over everybody else who could have an opinion on the tech sites themselves. They're all in the Priority Creators Club on YouTube. They're all promoted openly by Facebook. They're all blue check marked on Twitter. People like me, however, are not. So if there's an attack on the free press, it's coming, yes, in some cases from the tech firms, in some cases not. When it is, it's not aimed at some corporation. The idea, and look, I'm reading the tagline, ad revenue that used to support journalism is now captured by Google and Facebook, and some of that money supports and spreads fake news. Fake news, like when CNN said that it was illegal to read WikiLeaks releases. Fake news like that NBC report a couple of days ago that caused so much of a fracas. Oh, no, not that fake news. See, accuracy is in the eye of the beholder in some things. Like in an opinion piece, there can be, if you're just giving your own honest opinion, how can you construe that as fake news? If you're trying to misrepresent an actual objective factual event, if you're trying to say that the sky is red when it's blue, If you're trying to say up is down, something like that, okay, that can be fake. That's done all the time by the corporate media. Again, there's no introspection here. There's no attempt by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journals, or any of these other companies to look inwards, to discuss why they're losing viewership, why they're losing readership. Instead, they would like to blame some external entity. The idea of fake news or extremism or bad content and wrongthink is just their latest attempt to justify their own authoritarian existences, even though they are consistently losing steam. But that predates a lot of these social media firms. They've been losing steam in some cases for several decades anyway. These firms, I guess Huffington Post right now is being sold. They're downsizing at the moment. They're trying to get offloaded. I think Verizon got them. They've sold off Tumblr for several dollars, and now they're selling off Huffington Post because it's not profitable. These sites, it doesn't make sense for them to run. Like, if it's bare bones like Drudge Report, and you're just aggregating links and occasionally giving your own thoughts, you can definitely make that work. And if you've got a younger, growing site, something that's actually hip to this generation instead of being for 50-plus audience like Huffington Post, yeah, you can probably make it, as long as you're willing to innovate. The tech firms themselves have enough innovation problems. YouTube is steadily pissing away the biggest chunk of brand loyalty of any corporation in human history. They had an army of literal magnificent proportions at their beck and call that they could have used, and they chose not to do that. Facebook stock is constantly declining. Their user base is declining. The same is true of Twitter. They've got enough problems of their own. How are they destroying democracy? They're destroying the ability of people to fairly talk about things, but none of these groups, not a single one of them as far as I know, demotes CNN. None of them demote the New York Times. They don't demote the Wall Street Journal. They demote me. They demote Tim Pool. They demote H.A. Goodman or Razorfist or somebody like that. Matt and Blonde have a show. It gets demoted. Stefan Molyneux uploads a video. It gets demonetized. That's the demotion. That's the attack on the free press. It's an attack upon, by the way, the very foundation of the concept, philosophically, of free speech, expression, and a press. In the philosophical manner, not just, well, my First Amendment, okay, that applies to the government, that's fine. Why does the First Amendment exist is what we should be asking ourselves as a society. To protect free speech, expression, and a free press. The press has nothing to do with you have a piece of paper saying you're credentialed enough to walk into the White House or the mayor's office in New York City. That's not what the press means. The press was literally a mechanical device. The press is a big wooden platform on which you put ink and typeface and press pieces of paper. It was a mechanical apparatus to be differentiated from the idea of simply speaking. In many cases, it had to do with billets and books. That's really what the freedom of the press had to do back then. We've got different technology now, but it's the same principle. It's just like there's a difference between a modern-day revolver or a handgun or an AR-15. There's a big difference between that technologically, between that and a flintlock rifle. That doesn't mean that the founders said, well, the weapons we have today, everyone's allowed to have, but, other than that grape shot cannon, you're not allowed to have anything that was made after the late 1700s. That's not how the Constitution works. That's why the Fourth Amendment applies to online discourse as well. The right to privacy doesn't terminate with a handwritten letter with fountain pen and papyrus, simply because, or something like that, or hemp paper, ironically back then, until recently was widely unavailable, maybe as an import. No, it's not the way that or the 10th Amendment, like it only applies to the original states. Oh, it doesn't apply. There's no 10th Amendment protection for California or Texas because they weren't there in the 1700s. Well, that's not the way that it works. The Constitution is a living document, as liberals themselves often like to say. The New York Times needs to realize they're not the only press in the world. And they're not even the biggest proportion of the press anymore. The corporate media is dying. They're dying not because of people like me being bad, not because tech firms don't openly favor them and prioritize them at every possible hazard, because they do. They're dying because nobody trusts them, because of their own fake news, which they promote constantly. And they never fully apologize for and retract. In many cases, it gets to the point of outright defamation. And they're sleazy. They're corporations. They're there to make money. It's great to make a living, but when you get to the point where you've got some billionaire running your company, yes, it's going to affect the news that you release. When you've got global multinationals owning most of these corporate media firms, they're going to tend to promote globalism and use whatever influence they have to denigrate actual sovereignty, actual national liberty. They're going to do that innately. People get pissed at that. Wow, it's almost like the internet allows them to have an opinion in a way that before the internet was public was impossible to have. It would have been very difficult. Do you think that it's feasible that before the rise of modern social media, even on the early wave internet, that I could reach the kind of audience that I do today? No, it would not have happened. By the way, despite the fact that books are old hat and have been around for thousands of years, I wouldn't be an editor and an author either, because there wouldn't be an on-demand service. You try going through a brick-and-mortar publisher and see how long it takes to release this many edited works. The fact is that your effort can outpace the ability of it to be printed. Well, that's not the case now that Amazon exists. Amazon, by the way, having its own problems with censorship these days. Yeah, the free press is under attack. This is the press. This is the news. It's funny because sometimes they try to use the excuse, well, what you do isn't real journalism. You don't go out and take footage and do interviews and stuff. Well, a little bit of the latter, but for the most part, it's analysis. Yeah, analysis and opinion. What do you think you get on the Huffington Post? What do you think you get on CNN most of the time? It's not journalism in the standard sense. Some local outlet goes out and gets the footage. They analyze it. It's the same fucking shit. It's no different. They pay money to some local group for footage or for interviews or polling numbers or something. It's no fucking different. It's the same exact thing. That's about all. Peace out.